Hey y'all, it's Ashley BOOKISHREALM and I'm back with another video. Today I am here to talk a little bit about some 2021, if I could talk, releases that I think you should read before the year ends. But before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about Book of the Month. So thank you so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. If you didn't know, Book of the Month is a super popular and fast-growing online book service for readers. The way that Book of the Month works is that their team spends the month vetting through hundreds of books to come up with a special curated list of new and early release titles so readers can spend more time reading and less time researching. So as you just heard me say, like, it's new and early release. So with Book of the Month, you do get the opportunity to read some books before their actual publication date. Book of the Month is risk-free. They have a skip policy in which you can skip any month that you would like and you will not be charged for that month. On top of that, Book of the Month has the best prices for newly released books. So today you can get your first book from Book of the Month for just $9.99 by using the code BOOKISHREALM. And let me tell you, $9.99 for a newly released hardcover is super good because most of them are extremely expensive, and if you're like me, balling on a budget, it's the right way to go. Okay, so let's see what books were included in July selection. Every month your books are going to come in this blue Book of the Month box. It also includes a bookmark, which I absolutely love. This month's bookmark for me says the original read receipt, which, if you know me, you know that I think that the Book of the Month bookmarks are just iconic. First book that I see this month is We Are the Brennans, and this seems to be a book that's going to focus on family reconciliation. So it focuses on the main character, Sunday, who wakes up in LA after surviving a drunk driving accident, and she has to reluctantly move back to New York to live with her family and also a ex-fiance, or be in the presence of an ex-fiance. And there is a man who basically brings her family's pub almost to financial ruin. So in order to stop this from going on, they have to tackle and confront all of the family issues that have been bothering them for generation after generation. So this is specifically focusing in on a Irish Catholic family that clearly, from that description, has been torn apart by secrets. So the next one that I have is 56 Days, and this is a thriller. It focuses on two characters who meet, and this is like right before the pandemic starts, and for the fear of them not being able to see each other because of lockdown, they make the decision to move in together. And one of our main characters is happy about this because she believes that she can navigate this relationship without the scrutiny of family and friends, and our other character is happy about this because it'll give him the opportunity to hide who he truly is. And then it kind of speeds forward to the present, and there is a decomposing body in the apartment. So now it's up to, I'm guessing, what's going to be like the police to figure out what in the world actually happened during lockdown in this quarantine process. This next one that I have is one that I'm actually really excited to read, and it's Sisters in Arms, and this is a historical fiction based off of the actual 688 group, or Army Corps group, and they are the first all-black battalion that is responsible for making sure that the men who are fighting overseas get their letters from their loved ones. And I think that this one is going to highlight a little bit about working in a segregated military and how impactful that is. And I wonder if, and this is just kind of like an aside from me, I wonder if this author is going to take the opportunity to explore what it's like to serve your country and serve in segregated armed forces and do what you can do to help your country, risk your life to come back to have to face racism on your own soil, which I'm very interested to see how that's going to be handled. But I actually had never heard of the 6888 before, so I think this one is going to definitely teach me a lot. The next one that I have here is Razor Blade Tears, and this is about two fathers, Ike, and I believe the other father's name is Buddy. And Ike and Buddy both have criminal past. They're both ex-cons, and they both find out that their sons have been murdered, and their sons actually had been in a relationship together. Ike's son is black, Buddy's son is white. Buddy still has ties to the criminal underworld, and they both had issues in terms of like being prejudiced against their sons and the relationship that their sons had together. So they decided to partner up and really show their love and admiration for their sons in their attempt to avenge their death. So I think that this one definitely is going to explore a lot of family dynamics. There's going to be a lot of talk about acceptance or not acceptance and being queer in your family spaces. So this is another one that I think I am really, really excited to pick up. And the last one for the July picks is The People We Keep, and this focuses on a young woman who is from New York, and she comes from a troubled background, and she decides to take a trip to Ithaca, New York, and there she finds a lot of friends. She feels like she's home, but I think she struggles a little bit with allowing her past to dictate who she is and who she will become. And this one seems to be a book that's going to focus a lot on found family. I'm a huge advocate for found family. I have my own found family, which I love and appreciate them. So I think that I may resonate a lot with this one as well. All right, y'all. So those are all the selections for the month of July. Like I said, the code for this month to get your first book for $9.99 is BOOKISHREALM. I'll be sure to leave the link to the Book of the Month website as well as the code down in the description box below. Thank you again to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. Okay, y'all, so let's go ahead and jump in and talk a little bit about some books that were released in 2021 that I think you all need to read before the year ends. So some of these you probably have seen already in my best and worst books of 2021 so far, but I thought it would be kind of fun to talk about some books that did not necessarily make that list, but are ones that I do highly recommend. And like I said, so some of these may be repeats, but others definitely are not going to be repeats. So the first one that I have on this list is The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. This is definitely a great one for those who enjoy YA fantasy. This one is a heavy book though. I wouldn't go into it lightly. Every time I talk about this book, I definitely talk about the fact of how heavy it is. It is very much so based on Namina's experience growing up as a child in Sierra Leone during the times of the Civil War. And this book specifically focuses on this whole ritual that happens where girls go through this process where their blood is drawn. If their blood runs red, that means they're pure, and if their blood runs gold, that means that they're not, and it definitely is supposed to lead to death. And there's a lot of brutality against young women in this book, but it's an interesting magic system, interesting world building. I still think that the ending happened a little too fast in terms of pacing, but overall definitely hands down one of my favorite books of 2021 that I think everyone should read. This was a long time coming. This was originally supposed to come out in 2020, but it got pushed back. But if you have not read The Gilded Ones, I highly recommend picking this one up and checking it out. I believe the second one got a cover. I believe it did. If it did, I will put the cover on here on the screen, and that one comes out next year. The next one that I have on this list is Yellow Wife, and this is one that I would also recommend not going into lightly. I actually ended up reading 3 of the books that are on this list in February, and it absolutely was not a wise decision at all. I shouldn't have, because they were all very, very tough books to read. So Yellow Wife is actually historical fiction that's based off of a real, like, I believe it's a slave prison, and it was gruesome. really, really gruesome. But the author changes the narrative around a little bit in that it is based off of this woman's life with the prison owner, and she is white passing, and it explores a lot of different themes in terms of motherhood, and it explores a lot of what happens when Black people are of a lighter complexion, or they're light enough to pass for white, and how traumatic that is. This book doesn't hold back at all. I don't know what I was even trying to say there, but it doesn't hold back from anything. It is right there on page. It's pretty gruesome, and the way that he treats her as his wife, quote unquote wife, it's difficult to deal with. And a lot of what she did was for the betterment of her children. She made some really, really tough decisions about her life and what she was willing to put up with and what she was willing to do. And that's why I said this speaks very highly to understanding motherhood. And like I said, this is not one that you take lightly. I think that you definitely should read a couple of reviews, maybe look at some content warnings prior to picking it up. But it is one that, and to say I enjoyed it is it's very difficult to say that, because it wasn't an enjoyment, but I think it was very educational in a lot of ways, and I could appreciate the value of the story that the author was bringing to the table. But very, very well written, very, very well executed based off of this actual historical event or place and people. The next one that I have here is Chlorine Sky, and this is by Mahogany L. Browne. Now this one didn't make my favorites of 2021, and I don't think it will be on my favorites list for 2021 by the time I make my end of the year list. However, I think that people really should check this book out because it does something a little different that I don't always readily see in YA, and it looks at the heartbreaking feelings that one goes through when you lose a friendship. I think a lot of times when I've read YA, or when I'm I'm still reading YA, not like I'm not reading anymore, but a lot of times when I read YA, I think that a lot of the heartbreaking components that happen in a lot of these books is really truly related to romantic relationships. But this one steers heavily away from that, and it is about the fact that we are looking at a character who is trying to process what it's like to lose a best friend. And this is a book that I wish I would have had growing up, because sometimes losing a friendship is just as, if not more, heartbreaking than a romantic relationship. I think there's a closeness there that is taken for granted sometimes. I think when friendships end, I think that there is a huge emphasis that's placed on romantic relationships ending, whereas friendships ending too can be just as devastating, and you see that. So this definitely is not, and I'm giving this as a preface because I know there's a lot of discussion now about adults reading YA, but that's not the point of this. This is written for teen readers, so I am hoping that when adults go into it, they're not reading it expecting it to, which we shouldn't with any YA book, thinking that it should be written for us. We're not the target age, but this one definitely it's written for its target age demographic, so just keep that in mind. But I think that the lesson, the moral behind this, and the emotions that Mahogany L. Browne is able to convey with this book are really, really important. The next book that I have on this list is probably going to be kind of controversial for me, because I want people to read this book, because I still am having difficulty, what is it, July, March, April, May, June, July, like 5 months later, processing my thoughts on this book, and that is Black Buck. So I feel like this is a very polarizing book. Like, people either seem to like really enjoy it or like really hate it, and I don't know where I fall on the spectrum of that. When I wrote my review, I gave it 3.75 stars, but I also said that this was a book that I needed to read again before the year ended because I needed to really dissect the book itself, and that I probably wanted like access to a physical copy of it to listen to it and read it at the same time. So this is a book that is a satire, and it's written as a business manual, and it deals a lot with Black people in corporate America. And I think that one of my major issues with this book is that I think the first half and the second half are almost different stories, almost like there was a little too much that was being done. But I think that the core of what happens to Black people in corporate America, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm adding this one to the list not because it's a favorite or a book that I dislike, but because I just want more people to read it so I can get everyone else's thoughts about it. So it could be extremely selfish of me to put this one on this list, but I just needed to add it because I just need to see and hear more thoughts about it. It's just, it's an interesting book. You know what's up. You knew this book was going to be on this list. There's no way that I can make a list about 2020 new releases that you need to read before the year ends and not include Amari and the Night Brothers. This book, or the second book, has already gotten its cover. Comes out next year. The cover is absolutely beautiful. Cannot wait to get my hands on it. But let's just talk about the fact that I know some of you who watch me still have not read Amari because you told me you have not read Amari. So I specifically added this to this list to remind you all you need to read Amari and the Night Brothers. It is the most epic middle grade fantasy ever. The best, one of the best of 2021. It is going to be a strong contender depending upon what else I read for the rest of the year. So I'm not going to even talk about what this book is about. I talk about this book all the time. I feel like most people who have read this book have loved it. So this is my final reminder. Pick up Amari and the Night Brothers, please. The next one that I'm adding to this list is one that I actually just read myself, which is interesting, but I thought it was done very well. I actually just did a review. I just included this one in my June wrap up, and it is A Low Country Bride. And this is a good one for romance readers who are looking for a book that explores a lot of different things. I think that, like I said in my review, in both my written review and my review that I did on my channel, I think that this book handles a couple things very, very well. It definitely gives strong background of Black history, doesn't shy away from it. I think it's interesting that we have a biracial main character that's half Filipino, half Black, and is very determined to incorporate both aspects of our cultural background into the work that she does. I think that this book handles dating with children very well. That balance, I keep talking about that, but that balance is very important from a single mom to other single parents. Like, definitely a bonus here. But I just think it was a well executed, well written book. Very, very cute, very, very charming, great disability representation, and I just can't wait to see what else this author is going to do in the future. So if you're looking for, because I think everything here that I've mentioned so far has been kind of like on the darker side, or the deeper side of things. Not to say that this book doesn't have its deeper or darker moments, but I think the romance makes it very, very uplifting. Very great book. Read it if you haven't read it. The next one that I'm going to add to this one, because I think it's a great children's book if you've never heard of it, and it's JD and the Great Barber Battle. I can't remember when I read this book this year. It probably was around like March that I read it. It was either February or March that I read JD the Great Barber Battle. This is a cute children's chapter book, and it's about JD, whose mom gives him, attempts to give him a lineup before I think he goes to second grade, and his mom like butchers his head. It's just bad, and he does all of these weird things trying to get his hair to look decent, and then he finally decides to take a pair of clippers, cut his own hair, and then he finds out he's got talent. So it ends up being this thing where, you know, you have a kid who's trying to be an entrepreneur with a haircut, make some side money, and then he has some competition, so it ends up being this great barber battle. This is a great book in terms of like positive representation of black hair, especially for black boys. I know that we do a lot of discussions around positive hair representation for young black girls, but I think that young black boys also need that. And it reminds me, going back to a section of Emma DeBerry's book Twisted, in which she talks about like black men not knowing how to take care of their own hair too, because they've been forced into certain situations where they didn't have the opportunity to do so. So this is one of those books that does have great black hair representation, except it's for young black boys. And there's a second book coming out to the series which focuses on JD's sister. I'm sure that that one is going to have positive hair representation, black hair representation for young black girls. So the next three on this list, technically I just finished this month in July. All three of them have been great reads, and I'm trying not to say too much because I don't want to spoil what I'm going to be doing, like with my written reviews and also with my July wrap up, but I figured I'm going to add these to the list because I have enjoyed them and I've read them all within the past week or so. So yeah, you guys definitely need to read them too. So the first one that I have out of the three is going to be The Cost of Knowing by Brittany Morris. And of course, Brittany Morris wrote Slay, which I absolutely love. It was the first book that I read that I like felt 100% seen, and which is crazy considering that I've been reading for so long. Not that I didn't read books of black characters or anything like that, but that book just made me feel like, okay, you know exactly how I feel about a lot of different situations. So I really appreciated that book. So of course I was going to be down to read The Cost of Knowing. I will automatically say The Cost of Knowing is not going to be for everybody because it deals heavily with anxiety representation, and I'm glad that Brittany Morris did that though. But I also understand why it's a difficult book to make it through, but it's an inside look to what black men and black boys deal with all the time. So it is about a young black boy who has these visions in which when he touches objects, he can see what is going to happen in the future with those objects. So you can only imagine, like, every time you touch something you get a vision. It's overstimulating, and he gets a vision about his brother's death, and it is him spending most of the book trying to prevent that situation from happening. And it is such a great book about brotherhood. It is such a good book about what it's like to be in the shoes of some black boys growing up, because that anxiety that I think makes this book so difficult to read is the anxiety and that knowledge, that constant knowledge of what could possibly happen to you. It weighs on you, and it weighs on them, I should say, black boys and black men. That fear, that constant paranoia of what's going to happen, what's going to happen, what's going to happen, what's going to happen, what's going to happen. And although his visions are not only in terms of himself and what's going to happen to him as a black man, but I think that's the purpose of this whole book, is that anxiety is an allegory for how black men and black boys live their lives, in terms of constantly having to be aware of every move that they make, knowing that it's a possibility that if you end up in this situation, things can go horribly wrong. Having to live your life like that, and that constant fear it's nothing. It makes you anxious, gives you anxiety. So I don't want to talk more about this one because of the fact, like I said, I don't want to dive too much into it because I want to save that for my review. But if you can, if the anxiety is not too much for you, I would recommend checking out The Cost of Knowing. The next one that I have is How to Survive America by D.L. Hughley. This is the third D.L. Hughley book that I've read in the past year or so, and this one was better than the one that he wrote before this. And it is a clear analysis of the treatment of Black bodies in America, and he talks a lot about like the COVID response or lack thereof when it comes to Black and brown communities. He even touches a little bit on the distribution of the vaccine and how it's impacted Black and brown communities, and just the history behind the Black body in America. It's a lot of stuff that he goes into, but I think it was executed very, very well in this one, as opposed to his last one. It felt a little dated. This one didn't. I feel like he finished writing this one probably about February, March of this year. It came out in June of this year because he said something about, or maybe it was just an annotation that it was about February or March and they were talking about vaccination rollout and stuff like that. But I think that, of course, this is a discussion that is happening in terms of the medical field and Black bodies. But listen, the conversation needs to keep happening because it is a reality for a lot of us, and it is a scary reality. I had my own taste of what it's like to be Black and giving birth and having some medical discriminatory things happen. So it's reality. This is not just people making this stuff up and, we're just saying things to say things. We talk about past trauma, like things like the Tuskegee experiments and stuff like that, but there's still stuff going on right now that is very detrimental to Black and brown communities. I'm speaking, of course, from the experience of being Black and having a very interesting relationship with the medical community. So yes, definitely check that one out. D.L. Hughley, of course, adds his own touch of humor, but I would recommend reading it. And the last one that I have on this list is Excuse Me While I Ugly Cry by Joya Goffney. Literally just finished this book not too long ago and absolutely enjoyed it. It is about Quinn, who likes making lists. Quinn is a list maker. That's how she journals. She makes lists about everything, and then she ends up switching her journals by accident with our hero, and then someone then takes the journal and they start exposing the list that she's made. I think what is really enjoyable about this one is that it explores what it's like to be a Black teenager going to a predominantly white school, what it means when you are Black, but when you talk a certain way, act a certain way, dress a certain way, you're not considered Black enough. You move into white spaces and you're too Black for white spaces, or you have white people who take advantage of you being in predominantly white spaces, like freely using the N-word or saying really racist things and kind of laughing it off, and you end up being that token Black friend. As someone who's gone to predominantly white schools for the majority of her life, I could tell you that I really, really resonated with some stuff that Quinn was going through. And I don't think all Black people go through it, but a good bit of Black people do go through that phase of questioning of like, am I Black enough? So this was not only just a look at the relationship between Black and white people, especially Black and white teens, but it was also a look at the inner workings of the Black community itself, what it means to be biracial. Like, if you're biracial and you quote unquote act more Black, like, do you have a right to do that because you're biracial? And why do we call other Black people Oreos, which is a racial slur? Black on the outside, white on the inside. So it was a lot of different layers to this one that I liked. Thought the narration was great. It was just a phenomenal book. So not going to talk too much about this one either because I still haven't reviewed this, but I definitely recommend reading Excuse Me While I Ugly Cry if you haven't done so yet. All right, y'all. So those are 2021 new releases that I think you should read before the year ends. If there are any 2021 releases that you think I should read before the year ends, let me know in the comment box below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content friendly, If you want to see more content from me, kick the subscribe button. Don't kick it, because that means you're kicking your device. Click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. If you're interested in supporting this channel or following me on social media, all those links will be down in the description box below, and I'll be back with another video soon.